For most of the 20th century, scholars filed the Lemba's story of Semitic ancestors crossing the sea under one word: myth. In the villages of Zimbabwe and South Africa, with smaller communities in Mozambique and Malawi, there lives a Bantu-speaking people known as the Lemba, or Waremba. Estimates of their number range from more than 50,000 to perhaps 70 or 80,000 people. To the outside world, they looked like their neighbors and spoke Bantu languages like their neighbors. And yet, for generations, they carried something that set them apart, not in their faces, but in their memory. The Lemba said their male ancestors had come from far away, from a place they called Sena. They said those ancestors crossed the sea, arrived in Africa, married local women, and rebuilt their community. They kept customs that looked strikingly Jewish, or at least Semitic. They abstained from pork. They practiced male circumcision. They performed ritual animal slaughter. They observed a weekly holy day, and they married strictly within their own community. But here is the problem that would haunt them for a century. They had the story and the customs, but no proof. And when a people insists it is something the world does not see, the world tends to answer with a single, dismissive word. Part 1. Filed under myth. That word was myth. For most of the 20th century, mainstream scholarship treated the Lemba's claim as an identity story, a legend a community tells itself to feel special, to belong to something older and grander than the surrounding landscape. And the early science seemed to agree. When researchers examined the Lemba using classical serogenetic markers and later maternal DNA, the mitochondrial line passed down from mother to child, they could detect no differences between the Lemba and other southern African populations. On the mother's side, the Lemba were genetically Southern African. So the case looked closed. No visible distinction, no detectable maternal signal, just a proud people and an unprovable tale about a lost city across the water. But there was a detail the maternal DNA could never speak to. The Lemba tradition was very specific. It was the male ancestors who had crossed the sea, the men, and DNA carries one line that passes only from father to son, a line nobody had yet read closely. What would happen if you stopped looking at the mothers and started following the fathers? Part 2. The Line of Fathers. In the year 2000, a study appeared in the American Journal of Human Genetics, volume 66, pages 674 to 686. Its title read, almost like poetry, Y-chromosomes Traveling South, the Cohen Modal Haplotype and the Origins of the Lemba. The authors, Thomas, Parfit, Wheel, Bradman, and Goldstein, had done what earlier work had not. They followed the paternal line, the Y-chromosome, handed down unbroken from father to son, and they were looking for something particular, the Cohen Modal Haplotype. This is a Y-chromosome type associated with the paternally inherited Jewish priesthood, the Kohanim, who by tradition trace descent from a single priestly ancestor. If the Lemba story of Semitic forefathers held any truth, this was where a trace of it might survive. The maternal line had already told its part of the story. It looked local and African. More than a quarter of the sampled Lemba even carried an African-associated mitochondrial deletion, exactly what you would expect if incoming men had married African women. The mothers were African. Now the question was the fathers, and the fathers were about to answer. Part 3. the signal in the Buba clan. The results were striking. The team found the Cohen Modal Haplotype present in the Lemba at high frequency, but it was not scattered evenly. It clustered, powerfully, in one place. In Lemba tradition, there is a senior clan called the Buba, remembered as the clan that led the people out of Israel. Of all the places this priestly marker could have landed, it concentrated precisely there, in the Buba. The statistical link between membership of the Buba clan and possession of the Cohen Modal Haplotype was significant, with a probability value below 0.0001. In other words, this was almost certainly not chance. A people had preserved an oral memory that their leaders descended from a Semitic priestly line, and generations later, molecular biology pointed to that very clan. It looked like vindication. It looked like the moment memory and science finally shook hands. Newspapers could write the headline almost on their own. The lost tribe, confirmed. But the scientists themselves were more careful than the headlines, because a marker that seems to confirm a story can also, quietly, mean more than one thing. Part 4. What the marker could not say. The authors of the 2000 study did not claim they had proven a Jewish origin. They said their evidence was consistent with such an origin, but could not prove it. They wrote that contributions from Jewish sources, from other Semitic sources such as Arab populations, and from neighboring Bantu sources were all likely. That is a crucial distinction. The signal was real. Its single meaning was not, and the reason lies in the marker itself. The original Cohen Modal Haplotype was defined by 6 genetic markers. 6 markers is a coarse net. That same 6-marker signature also turns up in many non-Jewish Middle Eastern populations. It is not a fingerprint unique to Jewish priests. It is a broader Middle Eastern echo. To get closer to a distinctly Jewish signal, researchers later used an extended version of the haplotype. More markers, far more specific to the Kohanim. And so a new question hung in the air over the celebrated discovery. If you tested the Lemba again, with sharper tools and a wider sample, including the Lemba of Zimbabwe, never studied this way before, would the Jewish signal hold? Or would it dissolve into something older and broader? Part 5. Origins Revisited. That test came in 2013. A study titled Lemba Origins Revisited, led by Sudial and colleagues, appeared in the South African Medical Journal. It re-examined Y-chromosome variation in the South African Lemba and, for the first time, in the Zimbabwean Lemba. It applied the sharper, extended understanding of the Cohen marker, and its conclusion was carefully, deliberately, two-sided. First, the non-African origin of many Lemba Y chromosomes is real. The core of the oral tradition, that ancient male ancestors came from outside Africa, from the Middle East, was not overturned. The fathers really had come from somewhere across the sea. But second, the data do not support the earlier claims of a specifically Jewish genetic heritage. The precise Jewish priestly reading of the story could not be confirmed with the more specific tools. Genuine ancient Middle Eastern paternal input. Yes, a distinctively Jewish origin, not demonstrated. Meanwhile, the historian Tudor Parfit argued he had located the Lemba Sena itself in the Hadramaut region of Yemen, a town largely abandoned centuries ago. The lost city, perhaps, was never entirely lost. But the neat headline, "The Lost Jewish Tribe, Proven," had come apart in the hands of the very science that seemed to have written it. Part 6. Memory and the Burden of Belonging. So what remains once the headlines fade? Not a debunking, something more honest and more interesting. The Lemba carried a story for generations: men from a distant land, a crossing of the sea, marriage to African women, and customs guarded across centuries. The genetics did not erase that story. The maternal line confirmed the African mothers. The paternal line confirmed ancient Middle Eastern fathers. The oral memory of migrating men who married local women was, in its structure, supported. What science could not do was collapse that memory into a single, tidy label to declare with certainty that the origin was Jewish, rather than more broadly Semitic. And perhaps that is the real lesson. DNA is not a verdict on who a people is allowed to be. It cannot rank ancestries or crown one identity over another. It can trace lines. It cannot settle belonging. The Lemba know who they are through their customs, their clans, and their continuity, a knowledge that does not wait for a laboratory's permission. The science added a remarkable chapter. It showed that a people dismissed as myth-makers were remembering something ancient and real. But the memory came first, and the memory, held for centuries before anyone thought to test it, was never only a matter of markers on a chromosome. It was, and remains, a matter of identity, carried across a sea and across time. If questions of heritage, identity, or belonging weigh on you, you are not alone. Consider reaching out to a trusted community elder, a cultural organization, or a mental health support line in your country.